Every trader begins this journey believing they're here to learn a system, a strategy, or a technique that will finally give them certainty in an environment that never offers it. But the truth is simpler and far more uncomfortable. The real journey you are on is not a journey through the market. It is a journey through your own beliefs about risk, loss, uncertainty, and control. The charts are not testing your technical ability. They are testing your relationship with the unknown. They are reflecting the mental stage you are in, long before they ever reflect your skill. You may think you're learning how to trade. In reality, you are learning how to stop fighting the market with your fears, your expectations, your hopes, and your illusions. You are learning how to align with a flow that existed long before you arrived and will continue long after you leave. The market doesn't grade you based on intelligence, effort, or potential. It only responds to how well you can stay neutral, disciplined, and aligned with probabilities. Every trader passes through stages not because the market demands it, but because your mind does. These stages represent different levels of psychological maturity, different levels of surrender, and different levels of trust. And the stage you are in right now determines everything. Your results, your consistency, your emotional reactions, and your ability to follow your own rules. You are not stuck because you're missing a strategy. You are stuck because you're resisting the stage you are meant to grow through. In the beginning, the market feels like a place of opportunity. Every move looks like money waiting to be taken. You're fueled by excitement, confidence, and the belief that you're about to conquer something that millions have failed at. But excitement eventually turns into frustration, confusion, and disbelief when results don't match expectations. This is the first shock traders face. The realization that intention doesn't create consistency. Action alone doesn't create consistency. Understanding doesn't create consistency. Only psychological alignment does. Then comes the stage where you search for the Holy Grail. You jump from method to method, indicator to indicator, thinking each new tool will finally give you the certainty you crave. But the more you search, the more elusive consistency becomes. And the reason is simple. No, strategy will work until you evolve into the trader capable of executing it without emotional interference. The secret that almost no beginner understands is this. You're not looking for a strategy. You're looking for yourself. You're searching for the disciplined, neutral, detached version of you that can actually follow the rules you already know make sense. As you continue, the emotional swings begin. A winning streak convinces you that you figured it out, that you finally reached the stage of mastery, but then one losing day shatters that illusion. And suddenly, you're back to fear, hesitation, revenge, and doubt. You're not failing because you don't understand the market. You're failing because you haven't yet developed the internal stability to handle the natural randomness of outcomes. You're still giving each trade too much emotional weight, treating every result as if it defines your identity, your future, and your worth. This is the stage where most traders quit, not because the market defeated them, but because their own beliefs about certainty, safety, and success collapsed under pressure. The market forces you to confront the truth. You cannot control outcomes, only your behavior. And until you accept that fully, you remain trapped in a cycle of emotional conflict. But if you continue past this stage, if you refuse to let your fear dictate your progress, you enter a new level of awareness. You begin to see that trades are simply expressions of probability, not predictions. You begin to recognize that losses are not threats, but costs of doing business. You begin to understand that winning is not a reward, but a reflection of disciplined execution over time. You stop attaching your self-worth to outcomes. You stop needing the market to behave a certain way. You start operating with clarity instead of emotion. This is the quiet turning point. This is where the real evolution begins. There is a stage where traders finally understand that consistency has nothing to do with being right and everything to do with being available emotionally, mentally, and structurally to allow their edge to play out. This stage is marked by a subtle but powerful shift. You no longer need to know what will happen next. You no longer fear uncertainty. You no longer resist randomness. You accept that anything can happen, but you also know that over time your edge will produce results if you stay disciplined. Take every valid setup because you understand that missing trades is just as destructive as taking the wrong ones. You risk a small fixed amount because you understand that protection comes from consistency, not confidence. You follow your rules not because you're forcing yourself, but because they represent safety, structure, and neutrality. Then comes the advanced stages where trading becomes effortless. Not because the market gets easier, but because you stop interfering. You stop projecting your beliefs onto the chart. You stop fighting outcomes. You stop creating emotional storms that distract you from simple execution. You begin to operate from a place of calm, trust, and objectivity. At this stage, you are not trying to win. You are simply allowing your edge to unfold trade after trade. Like brushing your teeth or tying your shoes, it becomes routine, unforced, unemotional. The market stops being your opponent. It becomes your environment. Your reactions stop being chaotic. They become consistent. And your results stop being unpredictable. They become stable. This is the stage where you finally understand that the true evolution of a trader has nothing to do with charts and everything to do with consciousness. It's not about learning more, but learning less. Unlearning fear, unlearning ego, unlearning the illusions. That created emotional distortion in the first place. And finally, there is the last stage. The stage of true mastery. It's quiet, it's steady, it's not flashy or emotional. It's the stage where you no longer measure success by how much you make in a day, but by how well you executed your plan. You no longer feel the urge to force trades or chase the market. You no longer panic when a trade goes against you. You know exactly who you are, how you operate, and what you expect from your own discipline. You are no longer searching for answers outside yourself. You are simply expressing your edge through consistent behavior. The question is not which stage you want to be in. The question is, what stage are you truly in right now? Not the one you wish you were in, not the one your results temporarily suggest. The real stage defined by your emotional reactions, your habits, your discipline, and your ability to stay neutral in uncertainty. Your evolution as a trader doesn't happen because you force it. It happens because you become aware of the stage you are in and accept what must be released to move forward. If you're frustrated, that's a stage. If you're confused, that's a stage. If you're chasing certainty, that's a stage. The secret is that every stage is necessary. Every stage reveals a part of yourself that must be upgraded. Every stage exposes a belief that must be replaced. And every stage, if embraced, pushes you closer to the only goal that truly matters. Becoming the kind of trader who can follow rules with unwavering objectivity. You will not evolve by wanting it, wishing it, or hoping for it. You will evolve by observing your behavior, accepting your emotional limitations, and slowly training your mind to operate in alignment with probability. And once that alignment happens, everything changes. Consistency becomes natural. Mistakes become rare. Emotional interference fades, and profits become a byproduct of your discipline, not a reward for your effort. So ask yourself honestly, what stage are you in? Are you resisting it? Or are you learning from it? Are you trying to become a different trader? Or are you trying to become a different version of yourself? The market doesn't decide when you evolve. You do. The moment you stop fighting the stage you are in, you accelerate into the stage you are meant to reach. Your evolution is already happening. The question now is whether you are aware enough, disciplined enough, and honest enough to step into the next stage with clarity, neutrality, and trust. The secret is simple. You don't trade the market, you trade your stage. And once you master the stage, you master the game. Every trader believes they come into the market to learn techniques, patterns, setups, or strategies. They believe the marketplace will reward intelligence, analysis, and effort. But what they never expect, what almost no beginner understands, is that the market doesn't measure your skill first. It measures your psychology. It measures your capacity to manage uncertainty, your relationship with loss, your attachment to being right, and your willingness to surrender control. Long before the market tests your technical ability, it tests your mental flexibility. Long before it challenges your strategy, it challenges your internal world. And long before you ever become skilled, you evolve through stages of awareness that shape who you can become as a trader. You don't grow because you learn more indicators or refine your entries. You grow because you confront the beliefs that distort your perception of the market. You grow because you learn to detach from the emotional impulses that used to control you. You grow because you begin to understand that trading is not about predicting what will happen, It's about managing yourself while anything can happen. Your evolution is psychological, long before it is tactical, and the stage you are in determines everything. The trades you take, the risks you accept, the mistakes you repeat, and the level of consistency you can sustain. In the beginning, the market appears simple. You look at the chart and see opportunities everywhere. Every move looks like profit waiting to be taken. You imagine yourself catching the perfect entry, riding the trend, and walking away with confidence. Emotionally, you're living in possibility. But this excitement comes from inexperience. It comes from not yet understanding the true nature of the environment you're entering. The market doesn't respond to hope or ambition. The market doesn't reward your desire to succeed. It responds only to the laws of probability and your ability to align with those laws without emotional interference. As you start placing trades, reality arrives fast. Losses come quickly, not because you're doing something wrong, but because randomness is built into every outcome. But in this early psychological stage, you're not prepared to accept randomness. You expect the market to behave the way you want it to. You expect to be rewarded for effort. You expect your analysis to translate into results. When it doesn't, frustration builds, confusion builds, emotional swings intensify. You start asking questions like, why did this happen? Instead of asking the only question that matters: what stage of development am I in, and what beliefs are shaping my behavior? The second stage is where most traders hide the longest: the search for the perfect strategy. You believe consistency is a technical issue. You believe the missing piece is an entry rule or a system you haven't discovered yet. You think if you find the right combination of tools, you'll eliminate uncertainty and prevent losses. But this desire comes from a deeper psychological need. The need for certainty in an environment that offers none. You're not looking for a strategy. You're looking for emotional comfort. You're looking for a way to avoid fear, avoid doubt, avoid losses. And in that search, traders abandon strategies that work perfectly well simply because their minds are not yet trained to execute them with discipline. You cannot evolve past this stage until you accept that no strategy can compensate for a mindset that is afraid of uncertainty. No system can protect a trader who interprets losses as personal failure. No method is strong enough to withstand emotional sabotage. You can only move forward when you understand that your inconsistency is not coming from the chart. It's coming from your internal reactions to the chart. Eventually, usually through repeated cycles of hope and disappointment, traders are forced into the next stage: emotional confrontation. This is where you begin to see the patterns not in the market but in yourself. You notice the way fear makes you hesitate. You notice how greed makes you hold too long. You notice how frustration pushes you into revenge trading. You notice how the need to be right stops you from cutting losses. In this stage, the revelation hits hard. The market isn't your opponent. Your own mind is. And unless you change the way you interpret the meaning of each outcome, you will continue to sabotage yourself with the same emotional reactions. Some traders break here. They quit before realizing they were on the edge of breakthrough. Others numb themselves with more indicators, more analysis, more data, hoping to drown out their emotions with information. But information doesn't replace discipline. More complexity doesn't replace clarity. The market continues to expose the same weaknesses until you decide to stop running and start evolving. This is where psychological development deepens. You begin to understand that the market doesn't owe you anything. It doesn't reward intelligence or punish mistakes. It simply expresses a collective flow of buying and selling. It doesn't know you exist, and that is your advantage because now you can stop taking outcomes personally. You begin to redefine losses not as failures but as neutral events. You stop reacting emotionally to single trades and start thinking in terms of series. You accept that a losing trade doesn't mean you were wrong. It means you participated in a probability that didn't play out this time. When this shift happens, your trading transforms. The fear that once paralyzed you dissolves because you're no longer expecting certainty. The need to predict disappears because you understand you don't need prediction to profit. The attachment to outcomes fades because you know that one trade means nothing in the context of hundreds. And as your emotional attachment drops, your clarity rises. You start seeing the market for what it is, not what you want it to be. The next stage is where discipline becomes natural. You stop breaking rules because you finally understand the cost of inconsistency. You stop chasing trades because you value psychological stability over excitement. You stop forcing outcomes because you trust the statistical edge over your impulses. In this stage, you are evolving from a reactive trader to a probabilistic trader. You're no longer driven by emotion. You're driven by structure, not because someone told you to have structure, but because you've learned through experience that structure protects your mindset, not just your account. With this psychological maturity, your behavior becomes predictable to yourself. And that is the first sign of genuine mastery. You can anticipate your reactions before they occur. You can feel fear rising without acting on it. You can sense greed creeping in and neutralize it with logic. You can differentiate between intuition and impulse. This awareness gives you power because now you are no longer operating blindly. You are consciously shaping your decision-making process. As you continue, you reach the stage where trading becomes less emotional and more procedural. Setups that once triggered anxiety now appear neutral. Losses that once shook you now feel routine. Wins that once inflated your ego now feel normal. You no longer ride the emotional roller coaster because you've built enough psychological distance to see each outcome objectively. Instead of fighting the market, you flow with it. Instead of reacting, you respond. Instead of second-guessing, you execute. And eventually, you reach the highest stage of evolution, the stage where skill finally expresses itself cleanly because your psychology no longer interferes. This is where traders operate with calm confidence. This is where profits become consistent because behavior becomes consistent. This is where you trust your edge not because you hope it will work, but because you have seen through hundreds of trades that it does work when you stay disciplined. This is where trading stops being a battle and becomes a practice. In this stage, you understand something fundamental. Skill was never the problem. The problem was the emotional distortion that prevented your skill from expressing itself. Once the distortion fades, skill shines effortlessly. And that is the real evolution every trader must go through. Not learning more, but unlearning the psychological patterns that prevented consistency in the first place. The journey of every trader begins with excitement, moves through confusion and frustration, progresses through emotional confrontation, matures through acceptance of probability, and reaches mastery only when the mind becomes neutral, disciplined, and aligned with uncertainty. Skill grows on top of this foundation, not before it. And so the truth stands clear. Every trader evolves through psychological stages before they ever evolve through skill. The question is not whether you are evolving. The question is how consciously you're participating in your own evolution. If you can master your mind, the market will reveal itself. If you resist your psychological stage, you will stay trapped in it. Your results will always reflect your mindset long before they reflect your method. Every trader begins their journey believing that progress comes from learning. They believe that the more knowledge they acquire, the more charts they study, the more indicators they memorize, the better they will perform. But reality is far different. Trading is not an academic pursuit. It is an emotional one. It is not the speed at which you learn strategy that shapes your growth, but the speed at which you detach from fear, illusion, and the emotional distortions that sabotage your ability to execute what you already know. Most traders do not fail because they lack technical skill. They fail because they lack psychological clarity. They don't lose because their strategy is wrong. They lose because their mind is not yet capable of following the strategy with consistency. The illusion beginners fall into is thinking their mind is neutral while the market is difficult. In truth, the market is neutral and the mind is difficult. The real battle is internal. Your progress depends on how quickly you can remove the psychological obstacles blocking your ability to act with discipline. Fear is the first obstacle. It disguises itself in hesitation, doubt, second-guessing, micromanaging trades, widening stops, cutting winners early, and avoiding opportunities even when the setup is valid. Fear is not a reaction to the market. It is a reaction to what you think the market might do to you. You are afraid of being wrong, afraid of losing money, afraid of looking foolish, afraid of repeating past mistakes. But the truth is that the market isn't doing anything to you. The fear you experience comes from holding on to the illusion that outcomes must go your way for you to feel safe. Until you detach from this illusion, strategy becomes meaningless. A setup cannot save you from your emotions. A signal cannot protect you from your beliefs. A system cannot compensate for a mind that interprets uncertainty as danger, you can know exactly what to do and still be unable to do it because fear distorts your perception and disrupts your execution. The faster you recognize that fear is a product of your internal expectations, not the external market, the faster you evolve. Illusion is the second obstacle. It shows up as hope. Forced predictions, the belief that you can control or influence what happens next, or the fantasy that you can eliminate losses entirely. Illusion convinces you that you can find a strategy that guarantees certainty, that you will one day master the market, or that with enough knowledge you can avoid discomfort. This illusion is seductive because it offers the emotional comfort of control. But trading is not about control. It is about alignment with randomness and probability. The illusion of control creates emotional tension. It causes you to resist what the market is showing you because it conflicts with what you want to see. It pushes you to impose your beliefs on the chart instead of reading the chart objectively. It creates confirmation bias where you search for evidence that supports your opinion rather than accepting that anything can happen. And when the market behaves differently than your illusion predicted, you feel betrayed when in reality you are simply attached to a false expectation. The greatest illusion is the belief that certainty exists. Yet, the market is uncertain by nature. Trying to eliminate uncertainty is like trying to eliminate weather. The only thing you can control is your behavior, your response, your risk, your execution. When you detach from the illusion of certainty, trading becomes easier. You stop demanding that the market move in your favor. You stop resisting losses. You stop needing to be right. You start seeing setups as probabilities instead of promises. Emotional distortion is the third obstacle. It occurs when your internal state shapes your interpretation of the chart. When you are fearful, you see threats everywhere. When you are greedy, you see opportunities everywhere. When you are frustrated, you see setups that aren't real. When you are euphoric, you believe you can't lose. These emotional distortions alter your perception and lead to impulsive decisions that sabotage consistency. Emotional distortion is why traders break their rules. It's why they move stops, increase risk, chase trades, or revenge. Trade. The distortion doesn't come from the chart. It comes from the meaning you attach to each outcome. A loss becomes personal. A win becomes validation. A change in market direction becomes an attack. But the market has no intentions. It does not reward or punish. Emotional distortion makes you believe there is meaning where there is none. Progress in trading happens when you detach from these distortions and see the market as a field of probabilities. When fear dissolves, you act with clarity. When illusion dissolves, you accept uncertainty. When emotional distortion dissolves, you perceive the market neutrally. At this stage, your strategy finally becomes effective. Not because the strategy changed, but because your interpretation of the market changed. A beginner trader looks at the chart and sees opportunity through emotion. A developing trader sees the chart through their beliefs. A mature trader sees the chart through probability. The chart itself never changes. It's the trader who evolves, and the evolution happens from the inside out. The truth is simple. Your progress is not limited by the complexity of your system, but by the complexity of your emotional reactions. If you cannot follow your rules, the problem is not the system. It is your attachment to the outcome. If you see and not sit through drawdown, the problem is not the risk. It is your relationship with loss. If you cannot remain patient, the problem is not the market. It is your anxiety about missing out. When you detach from the emotions that distort your clarity, you unlock your ability to execute with precision. Detachment is not the absence of emotion. It is the absence of emotional interference. It is the ability to feel an emotion without being controlled by it. It is the ability to see a loss without feeling threatened. It is the ability to see a win without becoming reckless. It is the ability to remain steady while the market moves chaotically. Detachment allows you to operate from a place of neutrality where your actions are guided by rules, not impulses. This neutrality is the defining trait of a consistent trader. Many traders mistakenly believe that neutrality comes from winning. In reality, winning comes from neutrality. You cannot wait for consistency to become disciplined. You must become disciplined to create consistency. You cannot wait for confidence to eliminate fear. You must eliminate fear to build confidence. You cannot wait for the market to validate you. You must validate yourself by acting according to your plan regardless of the outcome. Every time you detach from fear, you strengthen your psychological foundation. Every time you detach from illusion, you sharpen your perception. Every time you detach from emotional distortion, you increase your ability to execute consistently. This is the real progress. The progress no one sees. The progress that happens internally long before it shows up in your results. The fastest traders to succeed are not the fastest learners of strategy. They are the fastest dissolvers of emotion. They are the ones who recognize their internal patterns and interrupt them. They are the ones who accept uncertainty instead of fighting it. They are the ones who remain present in the moment rather than projecting expectations onto the chart. They are the ones who allow the market to be what it is and adjust their behavior accordingly. Progress in trading is psychological evolution, not technical evolution. Strategy refines your edge, but psychology determines whether the edge can express itself. No matter how advanced your system is, it cannot function if fear blinds you, illusion misleads you, or emotion controls you. But when you break these attachments, you unlock a version of yourself capable of consistency. So your progress is determined not by how much you learn, but by how much you unlearn. Not by how much information you collect, but by how much emotional baggage you release. Not by how fast you can analyze the chart, but by how fast you can quiet the noise in your mind. When fear no longer dictates your actions, illusion no longer clouds your vision, and emotional distortion no longer controls your decisions, you enter the realm of true trading. You trade not from hope or avoid dance, but from clarity and intention. Your evolution is internal. Your mastery is internal. And the moment you detach from the emotions that distort your perception, your strategy finally becomes what it was always meant to be, a tool for expressing your edge, not a shield against your fears. Your progress accelerates the moment you realize the market was never holding you back. Your attachments were every trader enters the market wanting answers, wanting certainty, wanting to know what will happen next so they can act without fear, without doubt, without hesitation. This desire is natural. It comes from the way we were trained to think long before we ever saw a chart. We were taught that success is tied to knowing the right facts, knowing the right solutions, knowing the correct outcome. In trading, however, the need to know is the very thing that prevents you from evolving. The market does not reward the need for certainty. It punishes it because certainty does not exist in an environment driven by countless variables. Any trade can win, any trade can lose, anything can happen. And until a trader accepts that truth, not intellectually, but emotionally, they remain trapped in the same cycle of frustration, inconsistency, and self-sabotage. The true transformation begins when you release your attachment to the outcome of any single trade. When you stop asking, will this trade win, and begin asking, does this trade belong to my edge? That shift is psychological. Freedom. It is the moment you stop trying to predict the market and start aligning with probability. It is the moment you stop demanding certainty and start accepting randomness. It is the moment trading stops being a battle and becomes a practice. The need to know creates pressure. Pressure creates fear. Fear creates hesitation, doubt, and impulsive behavior. When you need to know what will happen next, you place an emotional burden on the outcome. You attach personal meaning to each fluctuation. A loss becomes a threat to your confidence. A win becomes a form of validation. This emotional attachment creates distortion. You no longer see the market as it is. You see it through the filter of your expectations. But the market does not care about your expectations. It does not bend to your beliefs, your analysis, or your hopes. It moves according to collective behavior, not individual desire. The only way to align with this environment is to embrace uncertainty rather than resist it. And the moment you do that, everything changes. Trusting your edge over a series of trades requires you to think differently. It requires a probabilistic mindset. You no longer evaluate your success based on trade-by-trade outcomes. You evaluate it based on the integrity of your process. A single loss carries no emotional weight because you understand it is just one event in a much larger series. A single win carries no emotional inflation because you know it does not guarantee anything. You stop reacting to each outcome emotionally and start responding logically. This shift is not easy. In fact, it is one of the most difficult transformations a trader must go through because it means letting go of control. Not in a careless way, but in a mature, grounded way. It means surrendering the illusion that the market must behave in a certain way for you to feel secure. It means allowing randomness to exist without feeling threatened by it. and it means trusting that your strategy, when applied consistently, will produce results. Not every time, but over time. When you trust your edge, you stop trying to be right and start trying to be consistent. That is the essence of mastery. Being right is ego-based. Being consistent is probability-based. Being right gives you temporary pleasure. Being consistent gives you long-term freedom. And freedom is the true goal of trading, not the illusion of control. The shift from needing to know to trusting your edge rewires your emotional responses. You stop chasing trades because you no longer feel desperate for a win. You stop avoiding valid setups because the fear of being wrong subsides. You stop over-risking because you no longer seek large wins to compensate for insecurity. Your emotional state becomes stable. Your execution becomes cleaner. Your decisions become more neutral. Neutrality is power. It allows you to see the market without distortion. It allows you to assess trades without bias. It allows you to remain calm while others panic and patient while others force action. Neutrality is born from trust. Not trust in the market, but trust in your ability to execute your edge faithfully. A trader who needs to know what will happen next lives moment to moment, swinging emotionally between confidence and fear. A trader who trusts their edge lives in the long run, unaffected by temporary fluctuations. The market becomes a series of opportunities, not threats. Losses become expected costs, not emotional injuries. Wins become statistical outcomes, not ego boosts. This detachment is what frees you from the emotional roller coaster. It's important to understand that trusting your edge does not mean ignoring risk. It means embracing risk knowingly, deliberately, and calmly. It means accepting that uncertainty is part of the game. It means entering every trade with the understanding that it is only one of many, and its result has no power over your identity. You are not your wins. You are not your losses. You are the consistency of your behavior. When you no longer need the market to make you feel safe, you stop acting out of fear. When you no longer need to be right, you stop sabotaging your trades. When you no longer cling to predictions, you stop forcing the market to fit your expectations. With this shift, your emotional energy becomes available for clarity. You start seeing the structure, the flow, and the context of the market more cleanly because your internal noise quieted. Most traders never experience this transformation because they remain attached to the illusion that they can eliminate uncertainty. They search endlessly for a perfect strategy, thinking that more precision will give them more control. In reality, only psychological acceptance gives you control. Control over yourself, not over the market. The breakthrough happens the moment you realize you don't need to know what will happen next to make money. You only need a positive expectancy system and the discipline to execute it consistently. When that realization becomes emotional truth, not just intellectual understanding, you begin to trade with true confidence, not the fragile confidence that depends on winning streaks, but the grounded confidence that comes from alignment with probability. At this stage, the trade becomes simply a task, a discrete event, a move on the chessboard. You no longer attach your self-worth to outcomes. You no longer treat the market as a judge of your intelligence. You no longer depend on external results to validate your choices. You're guided by your rules. You trust your risk parameters. You accept your losses. You follow your edge. And in doing so, you step into the identity of a professional. Professionals think in series. They understand that outcome. Distribution is unpredictable in the short term, but highly predictable in the long term. They understand that their job is not to forecast, but to execute. They understand that their edge is defined not by a single trade, but by a repeated pattern of behavior across many trades. This long-term thinking gives them a psychological advantage over every trader still chasing certainty. When you trust your edge over a series of trades, you reclaim your emotional freedom. The market no longer dictates your mood. Outcomes no longer dictate your confidence. Noise no longer affects your judgment. You become internally independent, which is the highest form of trading maturity. The secret. Transformation is an internal shift. It is the point where you stop trying to control the market and start controlling yourself. It is the point where the need for certainty dissolves into the acceptance of probability. It is the point where your strategy becomes executable because your mind is no longer resisting its requirements. This transformation does not happen overnight. It happens gradually through repeated experience, honest reflection, and the willingness to let go of old beliefs. But when it happens, you will feel a profound sense of clarity. You will sense a deeper calm. You will experience far less emotional turbulence. You will trade with a level of confidence that does not depend on the outcome of the next trade. And from that moment forward, your evolution accelerates. The secret transformation is not about knowing what will happen. It is about trusting yourself to navigate whatever happens. It is about trusting your edge in the long run. And you learn to do that. Trading stops being chaos and becomes a structured, predictable endeavor. Not in the results of each trade, but in the results of your consistent behavior. In the end, your evolution as a trader is not defined by how much you know, but by who you become in the process of applying that knowledge. The moment you stop demanding certainty from an uncertain environment, you step into the only place where true consistency is possible. Growth comes from emotional neutrality, not prediction. From trust in your edge, not attachment to outcomes. When you release fear, illusion, and the need to be right, the market stops feeling like a threat and becomes a field of opportunity. That shift is the real transformation and the beginning of mastery. Like this video, subscribe.